Yes, so thanks for your patience. Welcome everyone. It's truly great to be here. We have more than 150 people that are signed up for today's webinar, where we'll deep dive into the switch to remote that has taken place in pharma and medtech, and of course across the entire society. A trend that was already on its way, but the sense of urgency changed more or less overnight. So I'd ask you to just take 1 second to think 6 months back. How did you engage your customers back then? And then consider how you engage them today. I'm incredibly excited to have with us a highly experienced panel that have been deeply involved in remote engagement, also beyond the past 6 months and the current pandemic. I'll introduce these five gentlemen in a second, and upfront apologize for the politically completely incorrect lineup. First, let me run through the plan for today. So what we're going to do here today is to explore various aspects of remote engagement. So we're going to look at some of the learnings that we've had over the during the pandemic. What are the takeaways, the good things and the bad things, what to take with us into the future of remote engagement. We're going to deep dive into remote customer experiences. What does it take to get it right, what to avoid, and touch upon how it links to customer journeys and other touch points. We're going to talk a bit about remote technology, so what is needed to support those engagements, and discuss the impact. How do we measure what a good, whether it's good remote engagement takes place? What are the KPIs that we need to set to measure success? Before we do that, let me just give you a very brief introduction to Agnitio. I don't know if you're all familiar with Agnitio. What we do is that we help life science companies engage with HCPs and other healthcare stakeholders in a compliant way. We do this across a number of rep-driven channels. So they, right now, first and foremost, include remote detailing, but also face-to-face e-detailing, as well as other digital channels such as email and content on demand. So if you have a look at the technology map here, you can see that engagements happening in Rainmaker up in the top upper right corner are all the personalized rep-driven engagements, and our technology ensures that data is captured in all of those touch points and engagements. On top of that, Rainmaker engagements are typically linked to the CRM system and connected to engagements in other broader channels such as social media, marketing, automation, and web communications. A couple of weeks back, Agnitio joined forces with and became part of Big Tin Can, that are leaders in AI-driven sales enablement. So it means that beyond the things that you see here, digital channels and capabilities and engagement handling, we've also extended our offerings towards sales training, sales coaching, sales onboarding of reps and customer-facing people. A lot more about that at another time. What I'm going to do now is that I am briefly going to introduce our panelists here today. So we have with us, to the left, we have Thilo Kölzer, who is the CEO of Antwerp, one of the leading healthcare agencies in Germany. He's also an experienced board director with a demonstrated history of working in the digital healthcare marketing and advertising sector for more than 20 years. We have Adam Ockleshaw, who has 10 plus years experience in healthcare with previous direct responsibility of designing and managing digital and remote sales projects for top 10 pharma and medical device clients. Today, he's a brand manager at L&R Medical, that are leaders in wound care and compression therapy. We have Julian Tompkins, who's a founding partner of international healthcare consultancy company Conceptus, with, I dare to say, lifelong experience in the life sciences. Julian was until recently president at Ashfield Healthcare, that you may know, a global contract sales organization that's based out of the UK and doing remote sales for Pharma and Medtech clients. Last but not least, we have Lars Meinke, who is the CEO at Ignition, and together with me, also part of the management team at Ignition. Before joining, Lars has had leading global roles in a number of technology companies, including NetNames and marketing automation company Apsys. I am Mads Bjarne Kornbæk. I'll be your host today and leading the session. I'm responsible for marketing at Ignition and part of the management group as well. We'll get back to the panelists and the panel discussion in just one moment. Before that, let me just kind of introduce you to the topic and take you through some of the overall perspectives on where we are and where we are heading. So one thing is that virtual has been our reality, but it's actually also going to be the new reality going forward, at least if we are hearing what they say at Serious Decision Research Group, which are part of Forrester. They recently released a new report and quote, enablement leaders continue to respond to the need for virtual selling competencies and sales methodology components designed specifically for success in a virtual environment. So it says something about the fact that we are also beyond the pandemic are going to experience a lot more engagement, a lot more selling done virtually. But how does this look in the life sciences in specific? Well, right now, what we are seeing is that if we take current status and compare remote engagements this quarter to the previous quarter, we've seen a 684% increase in the use of Rainmaker for remote engagements. So that's definitely an upward going trend. And is this also going to stick in the life sciences? So it seems, because we asked our biggest experts, which would be you, everybody in the audience, we asked when you were signing up for this webinar, how you expect remote HCP engagement to evolve over the next 2 years in your companies. And basically all of you state that they expect it to increase or even increase substantially, even though that we are doing a lot already. But that's all fine. That's it on our side of things and how the industry is responding. But what are the HCPs saying? Are they open for it? Are they ready? And as a matter of fact, HCPs often prefer virtual meetings, according to MedTech Innovation News and this quote here, simply because of the compliance, security, but also the convenience there is in doing things remotely. And the customers are also, life science companies are also experiencing positive results from remote engagements and customer positive satisfaction scores. So I'm just on my way to handing it over to the panel and introducing these fine gentlemen into the discussion. Before I do that, let me just share one brand new case study. It hasn't been published yet, but we just got the results, and I thought that would be highly relevant to share here, because one of our clients, a contract sales organization working with selling on behalf of a pharma company, this and several others, obviously, they are bringing diabetes products to the market in South America, because this company is experiencing, lack of reach and lack of capabilities and bandwidth to move into these remote locations. So this company, they do the selling and the engagement of HCPs on their behalf to make sure that their products are top of mind, and to help increase the likelihood that they're actually going to prescribe the drugs. So that's the case as such. I'm not going to dive into the project in more detail. What I wanted to share was some of the results, because one thing is to provide valuable information to our customers, to the healthcare professionals, which is great. Another thing is to support our customer-facing people with the right tools. That's also great. But in the end, we're going to be measured on the results that we drive. And here are some leading indicators, but also some indicators that we commercially benefit from doing things in the right way and doing it remotely. So what you can see here is that 92% of the HCPs that are involved and that are being engaged with would actually recommend this service to one of their colleagues. We can see that the HCPs rate the remote reps and the engagements that they have to 4.8 out of 5, which is pretty impressive. And last but definitely not least, 53% of HCPs are actually planning to prescribe to one of their patients within the next 30 days, or at least one patient in the next 30 days. So that's a very strong indicator that this has an impact. I'll leave it at that, and now I'll kickstart the panel discussion. To everybody here, thanks so much for joining. I know that we had more than 150 people signed up for the event here, so it's definitely something that has generated a lot of interest. So look forward to exploring it further with our dear experts. So let's kick it off. So perhaps just I'll start with you, Thilo. From your perspective, what did we learn from COVID-19 about remote engagement and customer experiences in the life sciences?
Yeah, well, first of all, we've learned that many things are possible in a very short time. So I think at the mid of March, we had some kind of we had to improvise, and we had to adapt very new things in a very short time. And then after that, we had a kind of, let's say, creative phase. So we had to find new solutions to, for example, engage to customers, and we had to normalize things a little bit. Let's say we had to find new workarounds and something like this. And so there were very exciting times, or very exciting months in the last 6 months. So I've learned that many things are possible in a very short time, and that we have to focus on technology and on innovation in the next 6 months.
Thank you. Yeah, is that
Mads, perhaps I can just add a little to that. Looking into what you just spoke about, Thilo, I think that some of the experience we had here at Ignitio was also that because of the situation, let's call it that, decision-making processes were definitely made shorter. So in the first few months, we probably experienced that things that would have taken 6, 12, 24 months deciding on what to do were decided in 6, 12, 24 hours and moved on. We had big global pharma accounts with whom we had been discussing different types of channel communication for 2 years at that point. And then who was still investigating the ups and downs on things, decided to do a jump in and say, okay, so we need to get our feet wet. We need to activate an idle sales force. So what do we do? And making. I'm not saying that they were they were making risky decisions, but they were more willing to make a bet on going down a route than we probably see and saw historically. That's probably not the part of our world already. Today, we're back to a scenario where quick time decisions have been made, and more long time decisions are definitely in the scope.
Thanks, Lars. So maybe I hand it over to you, Adam. So I know you've also, huge experience with remote from the past. What's a big game changer you've seen here, and how have you kind of coped with that?
I think it's similar to what Thilo said, one of reprioritizing as an organization. Pretty much overnight, customers were redeployed to the front lines and doing a fantastic job with COVID, but they still need their information on demand and in a convenient and in a new way to receive it. So how does industry respond so quickly in that kind of way? And I think with remote engagement, organizations went through a journey of we could or we should do remote to, as you say, we must do remote. And then the way in which remote should work then is probably no longer good enough just to offer it. It's now, it needs to be easy, but it also needs to be tailored and a really engaging way. I think the threshold for what good looks like has rapidly increased in remote now because of COVID.
Very good point. Yeah, and let me pass that on to you, Julian. So how is it that remote should look going forward? How is it that we should adapt organizations, and what to do now?
Well, I think building on the points from the other panelists, I think what happened in March was the industry just weren't ready for this, and that's not so unsurprising. I think, to summarize, I don't think the industry were ready for what's happened to the world. Unsurprisingly, I think that one of the critical components is you need your marketing teams to be aligned to the channel. And I think traditionally marketing teams were aligned to a more traditional way of engaging with customers, which was more face-to-face. I think the type of engagement that you need in a remote situation needs to be more omni-channel. And therefore you need content. And I think the content needs to be different. It needs to be shared with customers in a different way. It needs to be more engaging. It needs to add more value. Definition, just the word remote. Remote obviously means you're not sitting in front of a customer. So there is no physical interaction with that customer. You can't pick up all the non-verbal signals that you'd pick up if you were sitting in front of the customers. And therefore, your content needs to bridge that gap. And the engagement that you can drive through that content and the value that the customer gets from that content needs to be a lot higher if that individual was sitting in front of the customer themselves. So I think one of the big lessons is how you get marketing teams to better align to this sort of channel. And I think, Adam, you used the word nimble. I think probably what happened was the people who've won in this new world are the companies that are more nimble, move quicker, can make decisions quicker, and can actually align their efforts, The other thing that we have realized and that we've seen is that the relationship that you have with your customers is still really important. And we've seen contact rates plummet. I've had some customers say to me, we're going from 2 or 3 primary care engagements a day to 2 or 3 a week in some cases. Those are extremes, obviously, but total contact volumes have declined radically, sometimes because the healthcare practitioners have just not been available to be contacted with. But the reps who have got relationships and can engage with those relationships make a big difference.
Okay, thanks a lot, Julian. I thought you were just chopping out there for a second. So incredibly good points, and something that's definitely leading on to where we want to go now, because I'd just like to involve the audience that we have with us today and ask them about how they see customer experiences in their company. So I'm just going to launch a poll. So if everybody that's attending here could please have a look here and include their votes. The customer experience that we're providing remotely is maybe not as good as a face-to-face engagement. Some do say that it's better or similar. but I mean the majority, they seem to be leaning towards the fact that it's not necessarily as good as an experience. And I'm just going to run one more poll, and then we can discuss, because I thought this one was also pretty interesting. And this is something that you just touched upon, Julian, when we talked about the remote access. So whether that's the big issue or not. So what's the biggest barrier for creating a great remote experience? And you can choose between lack of remote access, lack of HCP insights to prepare meetings, technical difficulties, lack of relevant content, lack of ways to connect to other types of engagements. So I'll just give you 3 more seconds. 3, 1, and yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. And here we have the results. So lack of access is actually one of them. So when you see the feedback and the input that we get from the audience, what's your take, Adam, when it comes to why when it comes to barriers for creating good remote experiences?
I think the interesting one is the lack of access, because sometimes we get hung up on the vanity of a call rate, where, you know, who's that important to? Is that important to a healthcare professional? Absolutely not. It's important to industry. What we really should be interested in is, are we being valuable to a customer? So if we're not getting access to them, you know, should we look at ourselves and, you know, put the mirror up and say, well, you know, what is it that we're providing them that makes them not interested, and really look internally before we start pointing it to the other direction.
Yep. Good point. Thilo, so what kind of barriers? I mean, you're coming from more of the creative perspective. What do you see as you know, in terms of content and creativity and support for the remote engagements? What is it that's sometimes blocking creating the most optimal experiences?
Yes, let's say I think to have a convincing performance in the end. So I think in a face-to-face meeting you can be much more convincing than on a remote call for the moment being. So as we experienced today, so we needed I guess 10 minutes to keep things running today. So these technical, no, don't worry, but these technical problems are a big factor today. So in the last 6 months, I attended many meetings with these problems, and then I think this is key. And these problems lead to the point that there is no convincing performance in the end if you want to sell something, or if you want to be convincing. I think that's a very, very important point. And we have and that's regarding acceptance by the HCPs.
Yeah, maybe lead that on to you, Julian. So acceptance, how do we get this acceptance? How should pharma and medtech companies work to get that opt-in and get that recognition that it's a good, you know, that engaging remotely is fine? We can't hear you, Julian.
It'd probably help if I unmuted myself. I actually went out and spoke to some primary care physicians, and I did a bit of a round table with them, and I said, well, what is your life like at the moment in terms of engaging with patients? Because I don't know about in other countries, but in the UK, a lot of practices are shut, so patients aren't actually going into practices, and a lot of the consultations are taking place by physicians over the phone, and they are talking to 30, 40, 50 patients a day. So a little bit like our executive time, which is 8 till 8 on Zoom, they're 8 till 8 on the phone talking to patients. So actually finding the slot where you can actually get into their diary is one of the key things that you need to do. What does seem to work is they do still need to engage with the industry, and they still do need to engage with the latest thinking. And some of the areas that seem to have been working is if you can create webinars like this on specific topics, which allow them to opt in, then that is a good way to get the ball rolling, because it gives them a reason why they want to engage, and they do have a need to engage. And then one of the other aspects to that is how can you follow up on those on a one-to-one basis? So actually finding a vehicle to get the HCPs to come to you in the initial phase. And I was speaking to a general manager of a pharma company here in the UK just the other day, and they're getting 150, 160 HCPs engaging in their webinars at any one time, and they're getting something like a 40% follow-up on a one-to-one with those. So they're thinking creatively about getting HCPs to engage with them, and then they're thinking creatively about how they can then follow up on a one-to-one basis. And that's how they're getting their permissions. The other way they've done it is they've deployed customer service people that actually are phoning and booking appointments with HCPs and getting what they call e-permissions remotely. And unfortunately, that worked quite well in the beginning, but now every pharma company is doing that. So it's becoming a bit, but still that is a way of engaging with them.
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess the whole issue of access, I mean, that's not a new one. That was something that we very much discussed also before remote was kind of the only go-to-market approach. Lars, from your end, I know that, I mean, we're also trying to do what we can to make it as easy as possible to carry out these remote calls and remote engagements, and also some of the stuff that Julian is saying around customer journeys. Maybe you can reflect a bit on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are a number of elements that we touched on right now that I feel is important. This is, I think that if we look back to what perhaps were the early days of COVID before we move into what we can do. I think that what we saw was that the immediate switch of let's call it pharma behavior or industry behavior around the HCPs, where they took their traditional ways of engaging with customers and their traditional content, and then put it into a Zoom environment and wanted to be digital in that sense. And there was a few things lacking, and I think Thilo and Adam, you both touched on it, that there needed to be a shift in content as well. Content needed to change. Content needed to be interactive, as you were talking about, Julian, to make sure that there was a conversation going on, because otherwise it ended up being a very digital flood or tsunami of information shot at you, and the screen fatigue became quite obvious as we moved sort of into the early summer of things. Having seen that a lot of the industry is now starting to look into how to work with the content and how to work with the channels, I think we're seeing an interesting element. We're seeing our customers both conducting the traditional remote meetings as we do, in terms of using our technology to do this very life science specific engagement. But I think the interesting element is are the ones of our customers who have decided to understand that, diving into what you just said, Julian, that all of a sudden it's an 8 to 8 working day that a lot of our customers and our customers are actually carrying out. So one thing that I made a note of earlier that I reflected on is the on demand, and I think, Adam, it was you addressing it, that many of our customers, so the HCP community, are outside of work, expecting that the pull of information on demand, when you need it, how you need it, hasn't perhaps been offered yet to the extent that it's needed. But we're seeing the change in content, the change in how to engage, that is supporting the on demand, because as a physician, you could easily put your legs up, pour yourself a glass of wet wine, and it's 9 o'clock in the evening, and then you look at a study. You don't look at it at 3 in the afternoon or 11, or to have lunch. So that blend, or the blur of work-life balance needs to be supported. So it needs to be new content, but it also needs to be different types of channels that provides the pull from the customer itself. So it cannot stand alone as a remote engagement with a video chat. It has to be different types of channels, emails, yourself pulling the content when you want it. That's when you get a bigger flavor of how the HCPs are actually engaging with this.
Adam, thanks, Lars. Adam, let me ask you. So I know that medtech pharma engines are just big monsters, and it's difficult to move very quickly. Even though there's a lot of companies that have achieved really, really well in these difficult times, but it's still a lot of change management that needs to be taken care of. How to approach that, and have all these digital touch points and trying to connect them in a very smooth and quick way. How should companies do that?
I think it's one of trying to prioritize again. I know Thilo said as well, trying to repurpose content and put round pegs in square holes. It will only get you so far, and it will help you live today while you fight tomorrow. So that's a short-term stopgap while you really try to repurpose this material in a more optimal way for the channel. So I think in terms of addressing that gap, every company knows what their key selling message is for every product, and that doesn't change. But what does change is we need insight on how people are now accessing this content, and platforms and systems that tell you things like it's mostly viewed on a phone. Great, what operating system, what dimensions, how big do I need to make this content, what scale does it need to be, the average view length. People don't watch videos after 30 seconds. Great, I need to make all my videos 25 seconds. So it's one of prioritizing your key selling messages, but then having the insight to know how do I now live in this new era and just try and figure out how people are absorbing content, because you've got webinars as Julian said, and you've got remote meetings, and I know we've talked about that, but there's lots of different touch points that all this data falls to our fingers. We need to know how to optimize it effectively.
Thanks a lot. I'd like to get to you, Thilo, but let me just ask a couple of questions to the audience once again, because I think we should have a closer look at the reps and how they. So one thing is that this it's a matter of connected experiences or different touch points, but it's also the actual remote meeting. So let me just ask two questions. First of all. I'd like to hear from the audience how they actually engage. So the reps, how do they engage with HCPs today? Are you your field forces? This is anonymous data, so feel free to just share your thoughts here. But just to give us an understanding about, are you using phone? Are you using some kind of messaging chat, video conferencing like many companies, remote detailing? Or are you mostly using external partners to do this? And thank you. Quickly gonna share that. And as you can see, video conferencing, probably not that surprising. A lot of respondents saying that. And a few others. And then I'm just gonna take one more. Because what I thought was interesting before asking you, Thilo, is also to see, so what is it that's needed? What's important for reps to provide this great remote experience? What are they lacking? So if you could please share your responses, and then we're gonna continue the discussion. Is it the right training, the right technology, the customer insights to plan the meetings that you were just mentioning now, Adam, right content, right incentives? What is it that should be focused on? And thank you. And let me just share those results, which means that it's a kind of a little bit of a split decision, but there is something about training, insights, and content for sure, technology to some extent as well. So Thilo, how from a content perspective, how is a remote meeting, how is that different from a face-to-face meeting, and how to best support that field force with the right materials that they need?
Yeah, I think content in the digital world has to be more interactive. and has to be more impressive, let's say. So you don't have face-to-face contact, so you have to engage with content on your own a little bit more. So I think it's I can tell you a story. A couple of weeks ago, I had my first meeting in a virtual space, in a virtual reality space, and it was impressive. So it worked very well in real time. I just had to put on the VR headset, and I had a, let's say, real face-to-face meeting with another person sitting in another city, and we were talking together, we were chatting together, and the other person explained me or showed me some content based on a 3D model in the space. So it worked very well, but nobody today, or no doctor has a VR headset in the end. So it's a question of time when a new technology evolves. So I think it's a good example for a really immersive content in a digital world. So for today, if you use the Zoom meetings and so on, we use the same content in the end as on a face-to-face meeting. But I think we have to go the next steps regarding content. We have to reach the next level in the next 11, 12 months.
Super good point. Adam, do you have a comment on that? So what is needed to help your reps best in the actual engagement when they're on online?
Yeah, I think a lot of content is something to think about. I think, Julian, you mentioned this right at the very start about just the sheer quantity. You can get through. I know I mentioned my point before about core rate, and bear that in mind. But you do get higher core rates, because you tend to be targeting more people through remote. So with that, you burn through content quicker, and a campaign will need to be refreshed a lot more frequently, and so customers will get that boredom, or they've seen a message before, so they'll need more reasons to keep coming back for more. So I think, other than what I completely agree with what Thiele's already said, but just sheer quantity as well is something to consider.
And sorry, can I add something? Adam, as you work for Lohmann and Rauscher, so you're a specialist in wound care, I think. So for example, in wound care, you have to use augmented reality technology just to show how a healing process is going on, for something like that. I think this is a new, this could be the next level of content, not just show an image, but show a process, show a mode of action or something like this.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. And I think as generally hardware and technology, new iPhones with LiDAR and all that kind of technology that comes through, in the future, when maybe when we are back out in face-to-face land, or maybe virtually still, showing people the layers of a dressing, or you say the wound healing process in their setting, it might help that content resonate a little bit better. So I think generally the speed of which technology is increasing opens up so many doors and so much creativity from companies like yourself, Thiele and Julian, to maximize brands that companies like we have. So yeah, I completely agree.
Okay, so I'm picking up on a lot of content, engaging, interactive content, something that's visual and something that's compelling, and the quantities. Is there something else, Julian? Is there something else when it comes to content that people need to consider in their, in planning of providing the right content at the right time to the right HCP?
Yeah, look, I don't think we should forget that HCPs are consumers just like any of us. So, at the end of the day, I think one of the critical elements of whether you get somebody to engage with you is around relevance. Is what you are trying to get in front of that customer or communicate to that customer relevant to that customer at that particular time? And if we're consumers in our own world and what we get pushed at us is not relevant, then we switch off and we don't take it on board. So I think it has to be relevant. I think it has to be engaging. I think the challenge for the industry is how can you draw customers into that engagement? So, just putting detail aids out there that we had when we were in front of customers isn't going to work. It has to be more animated. I think the other insight that I've had from talking to customers is they want you to give them something that they don't already know, or it would be difficult for them to get through another medium. because if they see you as a channel for getting information and content and knowledge that they can't get from anywhere else, then they'll come back to you and they'll reuse the channel.
So I think that's a super good point. And I mean, from working in marketing, we're always thinking about, providing content that's relevant and that could, shed some interest. But I can also imagine that, Adam, for your reps, that at some point they feel that they've kind of provided everything. So what is it that they need to think? We need to think differently about. Is it to provide information beyond the product itself? Is it something that's different from what they used to, discuss and engage on, or what is it that can be, added to the conversations and to the toolbox?
Well, I think it's probably one of just partnering with, in the UK, especially the NHS. I feel sometimes industry do a bad job of partnering with the NHS, and we can do better, and we do that better. So, it'd be quite short-sighted to go, right, I've delivered my key selling messages, I'm happy, you're happy with the product, and walk away. What we should do and what industry needs to do is to keep that relationship going and follow the patient journey after the point of prescription, it might be, or something like that, and make sure that the wider journey is maintained. So content on working with them more long term past the point of prescription, past that point of conversion is something that we need to do to improve the overall relationship. And as Julian says, keep them coming back for more, to say, this company is really invested in my patients, and they're offering more past the point of prescription. I'm definitely going to use that channel more, and I'll reach out to that channel more now rather than just waiting for it to come to me.
I think that just adding to that, Mads, as well, to what Adam was just saying, I'll address a pink elephant in the room, which is the capabilities or the skills of running new types of channels. So being part of supporting the industry with technologies, we need to address the point in tech savviness that either exists or doesn't exist within an industry. And I think that it's an important element, and it was actually ranking a little hidden 2 or 3 on the poll before, but the additional training. So equipping people with new technologies, new types of contents, new ways of communicating. The element of training cannot be missed, and where we see implementation working best across our customer base is where the retraining of an existing sales teams or rep teams have actually been part of the process, not only providing them with technologies and content, but real training in how to use the technologies, how to use the content and technology combined to get the best result out of it. And I know it's a little prerogative to throw in there, having the industry on the call, but it is something that when we see it not being done, it's a very different outcome altogether.
Does anybody feel like commenting on that?
I would like to add that we have to think regarding patient centricity. So we have, in the second step, enable doctors to talk to their patients in other ways, because patients there were less consultation hours in the last 6 months. So we have to talk about new things of interaction between doctor and patient, and maybe the industry can support this.
Yep, and that is something which is becoming more and more prevalent in healthcare in general. Not the way one doctor talks to their patient on an inhaler is very different to how another doctor talks. And that's not just even talking about things like translation services. It's just the sheer words and how they explain their condition needs to be considered in marketing materials and patient support literature. And then you get into how many permutations can you make? How personal, how deep can you go with that level of personalization? But it's important.
I think Lars's point, the skill of the rep is quite an important thing. Not all reps who are brilliant at face-to-face are going to be brilliant in a remote world. I'm afraid that's just a fact of life. I think the ones that can become really good hybrid reps, where they can leverage the relationships that they built in a face-to-face content, but can do it remotely, those are the guys that are winning, guys and gals that are winning at the moment. And what we should probably also look at is what existing platforms are out there that we could partner with, or the industry could partner with. There are a lot of patient platforms, and there are a lot of other platforms that HCPs engage with. And the industry could play a really important role at actually bridging that gap and creating compelling content to put onto those platforms.
Thanks, Julian. I'm just gonna, in respect of time, I'm just gonna move the conversation a little bit onwards and ask about KPIs. So how do we measure success? You remember the case example that I gave in the beginning that showcased prescription intent and other factors. But what is it really that's most key, and how is it that in reality that you measure the impact from your remote rep engagement? So I'm just going to launch a poll for the audience, and then we can discuss it. So the question is, how do you currently measure success from remote engagement? And you can even select more options, but the number of meetings, engagements, quantities, key message delivered, more on the content side, customer satisfaction, revenue, sales numbers, if possible, rep feedback, satisfaction. So I'll just leave the vote on for 5 more seconds. So for the rest of you, 3, 2, 1, and thank you so much. Okay, so this is an interesting one. So we more or less have a split between number of meetings and sales numbers. So is that a surprise to any of you?
I'll actually just perhaps throw a comment in there, because it ties back to what you said it earlier, Adam, that you've taken it seems as if the industry has taken the KPIs that they were using in the face-to-face environments into the digital environment, and the question stands still. So is it the right? It's very hard KPIs that are sitting in there right now as we see it, and they were exactly the same as they were 9 months ago, before any of us knew of what was ahead. What's your take, Adam? Running, I'd love to hear sort of from someone running one of the teams.
Well, I mean, I'll think back to past experience. Sorry, if that's right, rather than current. It'd be so easy just to kind of say, oh, well, you did 4 in the field, you can do 4 remotely. It's the same customer base. It's not. It's completely different. One of the options which might be interesting, I know it wasn't on the poll, was the number of repeat people who come back. So rather than just the sheer volume of, we've got a universe of 10,000 customers, oh great, we've spoken to 90% of them. Sometimes it's more important to look at, we spoke to 300 and 150 of them came back for 3, 4, 5 meetings, and that really shows that channel is really useful to that cohort. I do appreciate the sales side of it. Ultimately, we've got to figure out, is that channel providing revenue? But then is it a question that the method isn't efficient? Is the channel efficient, or is it the marketing messages, they're not efficient, or the training of the representatives, is that not efficient? So you can muddy the water by looking at, you're not really sure what the cause and effect is. Sometimes are you looking at the message that's being said, or the method of how it's being delivered?
Maybe you can expand on that, Julian. From working contract sales organizations, I know you both have, but looking at that, how remote engagement, how do you present that it has value?
Yeah, look, I think some of those measures are blunt instruments. I think you do have to measure, how many engagements you have, because if you don't measure, because that's going to be a measure of your return on investment. If your people are seeing 1 HCP a week, that's a very expensive deployment of people, and that may lead you to invest in different ways of interacting. So I think you do have to look at the level of activity you can generate through this channel, and that also gives you a measure of how you're progressing. But how many engagements you have also is a measure of the platform that you're using. So how easy is it to engage, and the content that you put in it? Because if doctors love the content, they will engage with you. And if it's really engaging and it's adding value to that interaction, they'll come back for more engagements. And if the reps are really skilled at doing it, then they will get repeat engagements with those HCPs. So I think you probably have to have more nuanced KPIs, which when you add them all up, then that creates the revenue thing. The other thing that I'm looking at is the depth of engagement that the HCP has with that interaction. And, you know, can we measure that? So I've got some examples in other countries where people spray communications at doctors, and the doctors open them up and they don't read them. So the level of engagement is very shallow. And actually, if you want to make a difference to a doctor's view or an HCP's view, or whether they actually do something differently as a result of that engagement, you need to understand what element of that engagement they're engaging with and how deep they're going. So I think you probably need some more sophisticated measures.
Sounds very
and
good.
There is technology available that can help you do that, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so maybe yeah, I'll go with you first, Thilo, because there was something about key message delivered. So from a content perspective, that was not that didn't rank that high up the ladder. So why? I mean, how would you measure the effect of content and the impact on remote engagements in your view?
Yeah. So remote engagement, let's say it's now it's a digital channel amongst others. So in a digital world, we can measure nearly everything. So I would propose to adapt to the digital world regarding KPIs. And for example, the number or the awareness in minutes for a certain piece of content, for example, could be a key element. So it doesn't matter if it's a remote call or a chat dialogue or let's say an email. It's the same piece of content in the end, but shaped to the different channels. But I would like to know how many minutes a certain doctor read the content or interacted with it. So I think it's not the channel itself; it's the content in the end. I want to measure the content performance.
Yes, good. And you, Lars, is there something in that regard? I know that we are working very closely with, you know, picking up data, deep data on the content and key message performance as part of our platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And Thilo, you're right. It's the time you spend consuming a content piece rather than the number of content pieces you consume typically. And it is, we know that from our customers, it's one of the things that they want to know. So not only when and how, but for how long, and following that, also starting adding those ideas of what is then the next thing to do. So once having consumed this, how do we start building that into bigger scopes of feeding similar content pieces that can build, let's say, journeys. It's a bit of a cliche talking about customer journeys still, but build a route of different content pieces that where you can continuously go deeper and deeper by the steering of the HCP, because that is still the important part. Is that as you said, Julian, HCPs are consumers like the rest of us, so we need to let them consume in the way and in the time that they want to do, but we need to understand what they do it and use it as constantly feeding new content in front of them. They'll let us know when they don't want it anymore anyhow.
Yeah, and I guess it's about having that content that's relevant for where they are at in the adoption of, you know, the product or the service or whatever it is, so that it kind of fits with that. Before we are rounding off, because now we have a couple of minutes left, I just want to ask the piece of advice from everybody. But first, I'm just going to launch the last poll to the audience, because I'm curious as to what the top priority investment wise will be in remote engagement in your companies in the next 2 years. So what is the primary one that you're going to be focusing on? Is that remote strategy, go to markets? Is it sales training and coaching, content, technology and tools, people and partners? And 2 more seconds. And Appreciate that. Okay, so the last poll that we're going to see, there's still a lot of work that's going to be put into the strategy and the go-to-market, but also on content, some on sales training and other elements. So one final piece of advice, guys, and first of all, thank you for your time, obviously. Start with you, Adam. What would be your piece of advice for people that are looking to expand this further and invest more in remote?
I think it's one of round pegs and square holes. It's just trying to make sure that it's okay to do it in the short term, because there's an absolute need to still communicate with customers, but it won't be sustainable. So these are completely two different channels in every way and form, down to Julian touched upon the profile and kind of the skill sets, all the way through to content and actual KPIs as well. So my advice would just be to complete them in completely different channels.
Thank you. And you, Thilo?
I would say that I think people should put the learnings of the last 6 months to a strategy for the next 12 months.
Yeah, good point. Lars, do you want to go?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we just discussed over the last hour, there's a lot of moving parts. So it's the how to eat an elephant concept. You do it bite at a time. Start in a way that you can comprehend and that you can manage, and then build from there. So start small and expand. That's definitely the advice that I would give.
Good point. And a final word from you, Julian, and apologies for having your name spelled incorrectly underneath you.
Nobody will know who I am, so that's great.
You can say anything. Yeah, that's a good thing.
Look, for us, it was the 3 Ps. It was having the right people with the right skills. It was having the right proposition for the customer, which really added value to that whole engagement piece, and having the right platform. And the right platform is the technology, which makes it simple for your people to engage with customers and is omni-channel. So it's not just video, it's not just phone. It gives them the capability to communicate with customers in lots of different ways. If you've got the balance right between those 3 Ps, I think you've got a good chance of winning in this space.
Fantastic. Great way to end. Thank you so much, guys, for spending a little bit of time and not least sharing your experiences and deep expertise. And we'll obviously be working on sharing and developing as much content as possible, quantitative wise, but also relevant wise, in order to support what we can from our side on remote technologies and remote enablement. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time here today, and not least to you in the panel. So a couple of key takeaways from my end is, of course, it's reflected in some of the discussions we've had here today, but key is to build a long-term remote strategy that meets business goals and also the needs for compliance. Set KPIs that are actionable and measurable, so you know that you can actually see if you get the results that you're expecting, and you can look at it on not only on as a standalone channel, but you can actually also look at it across different engagement channels and touch points. And consider that this may be a massive change management project, but this transition doesn't need to be planned from the very beginning. As Lars was saying, start small, build best practices, then scale. So that's basically it from our end. When the session finishes, you're going to be asked a few questions to look forward to getting your feedback to see if we can do something different going forward and how else we can be of service to you. We'll definitely be in touch again. For now, thanks for joining and have a great day out there.